Nestled in a quiet suburb dotted with manicured lawns and flower-filled gardens, my neighborhood exuded an idyllic charm that was the envy of many. It was the kind of place where people greeted one another with smiles and children played freely in the streets until dusk. The homes, each unique yet unifying in their architectural style, were bound together by the unspoken camaraderie of shared living experiences. However, this picturesque setting was governed by stringent regulations imposed by the Homeowners Association, HOA, an entity that held considerable sway over our daily lives. The HOA was initially intended to maintain aesthetic standards and foster a sense of community. They monitored everything from fence heights to paint colors, ensuring that no neighbor strayed too far from the agreed-upon norms. Residents were required to attend monthly meetings, during which rules were debated and enforced with an iron fist. Compliance was not merely encouraged. It was expected. This often led to an atmosphere thick with apprehension, as neighbors tiptoed around potential infractions while grappling with Karen, the unofficial enforcer of HOA rules. Karen had made a name for herself within the community as someone who took her responsibilities far too seriously. With her clipboard in hand and a critical eye permanently affixed on anyone she deemed noncompliant, she seemed to derive considerable satisfaction from reporting minor violations. Her reputation spread like wildfire. Stories circulated about her encounters with residents who had dared to push boundaries in any way, be it parking slightly off-center or neglecting to trim their hedges precisely at 2 inches in height. Despite this oppressive oversight, communal events attempted to bring some levity into our lives, such as potlucks and neighborhood cleanup days. These gatherings offered respite from the looming threat of HOA fines while solidifying connections among residents who preferred camaraderie over conflict. Yet even here, Karen overshadowed festivities, armed with critiques for anyone who strayed from her vision of perfection. As I navigated through the suburban landscape, a place seemingly frozen in time where appearances mattered more than intentions, I often felt caught between longing for freedom and adhering to the ever-watchful gaze of HOA regulations. Little did I know that my interactions with Karen were about to take a turn that would utterly redefine my experience in this tightly woven community and set off a chain reaction that nobody could have anticipated. Karen, our neighborhood's equivalent of a rulebook avatar, had an uncanny ability to appear at the most inconvenient times. With her towering height and distinctive hairstyle, an ever-present top bun held in place by what looked like an arsenal of hairpins, she commanded attention whenever she strode down our quiet streets. Clad in pastel sweaters embellished with floral prints, she embodied the very essence of a suburban matriarch. But there was nothing nurturing about her presence. Instead, it filled residents with a sense of dread. Her daily rounds were methodical. Armed with a clipboard and an unwavering gaze, Karen meticulously surveyed her domain as if it were her personal kingdom. The moment a neighbor repainted their porch without HOA approval or parked a car too close to the sidewalk, she would pounce like a hawk going after its prey. Even the smallest deviations from the community guidelines could set off her alarm bells. Stories circulated about how she once called out a homeowner for leaving their garden hose out overnight, a blatant violation of propriety, in her eyes. While many neighbors avoided confrontations with her directly, I found myself ensnared in Karen's web all too often. My path frequently crossed hers during grocery runs or dog walks, occasions where niceties were exchanged only to be quickly followed by critical observations about the grass being half an inch too long or seasonal decorations that didn't align with the HOA's approved palette. It became painfully clear that Karen reveled in her role as the neighborhood watchdog. She was known for hosting monthly HOA meetings where mild-mannered discussions often devolved into debates about trivial matters. Residents would squirm in their chairs as she passionately championed stringent rules while dismissing anyone who dared to voice dissent. Her unwavering commitment to conformity left little room for flexibility or understanding, a reality that led some neighbors to adopt a don't-rock-the-boat attitude when it came to compliance. Despite this oppressive presence, rumors suggested that beneath her stern exterior, there may have been glimpses of warmth. Some long-timers recounted past instances when she baked cookies for newcomers or mended broken fences after storms. These rare moments sometimes cast doubt on her reputation as merely a pantomime villain clinging tightly to authority. Yet, as fate would have it, my interactions with Karen were destined to escalate dramatically. setting off ripples that would forever alter our neighborhood dynamic and lay bare hidden truths no one anticipated. The incident that would propel me into the crosshairs of HOA Karen occurred on what seemed like an ordinary Saturday. The sun was shining, and I had decided to take advantage of the beautiful weather by hosting a small gathering in my backyard. Just a few friends and some good food. Nothing outrageous, right? I set up a modest barbecue and put out some folding chairs, eager to enjoy a relaxing day with laughter and camaraderie. As the afternoon unfolded, we fired up the grill and played music, enjoying the festive atmosphere. Unbeknownst to us, our cheerful gathering was precisely the kind of event that sent Karen into a frenzy. Though I had invited only a handful of close friends, one neighbor, who seemed to have developed a knack for reporting infractions, decided to alert her about the unauthorized gathering. It didn't help that our light-hearted chatter drifted into the air, undoubtedly carrying all the way to her vigilant ears. In no time at all, Karen arrived on the scene, clipboard in hand and ready to unleash her wrath. With her eyes darting around as if searching for any rule violation, she zeroed in on the situation with all the fervor of a hawk spotting its prey. Within minutes, she was at my gate, arms crossed tightly over her floral sweater, demanding to know why I hadn't submitted an event approval request to the HOA. I attempted to explain that it was merely a casual get-together with a handful of friends, but she seemed unimpressed by my justification. Instead, she focused on hypothetical scenarios involving noise complaints and parking issues as if they were imminent disasters rather than mere possibilities. Her voice rose above our conversation as she claimed I was violating regulations regarding gatherings without prior notice. Feeling cornered by her relentless scrutiny and desperate to defuse tensions before they escalated, I suggested we transition indoors. However, Karen's indignation only deepened. In an impulsive act driven by frustration and her well-defined sense of authority, she announced that she would call the police, not merely to report my infraction, but seemingly out of spite. Before I could fully grasp what was happening or respond, she was already dialing 911. It was then that I realized how quickly an innocent afternoon had spiraled out of control. A misinterpretation of community guidelines giving rise to chaos and bringing law enforcement into what should have been a peaceful day among friends. Little did Karen know that this impulsive decision would soon unravel layers of our community's dynamics in ways she never anticipated. As the tension escalated and Karen dialed 911, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach, tightening with each ring on her phone. Within minutes, the unmistakable sound of a police siren echoed down our normally quiet street, growing louder as it approached. My friends, hearing the commotion, exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what was about to transpire. The festive atmosphere we had created moments ago shifted dramatically as reality set in. We were about to face law enforcement over what I had thought was a casual afternoon. When the patrol car rolled up, 2 officers stepped out, their expressions a mix of professionalism and curiosity as they approached our gathering. One was tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of authority that made it clear he was accustomed to handling heated situations. The other officer, slightly younger, wore a concerned frown that suggested he didn't quite understand the gravity of this situation either. Karen stood nearby, ready to step forward and provide her version of events with unyielding determination. I took a moment to collect myself before stepping forward to greet the officers. "Thank you for coming," I said, trying to maintain composure amidst the chaos. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." Before I could elaborate, Karen unleashed her narrative, pointing an accusatory finger at me while detailing my so-called flagrant violation of HOA rules. She painted a picture of chaos, a rowdy party full of excessive noise and unruly behavior, completely distorting the truth of our peaceful gathering filled with laughter and good food. Her fervor made me feel small, as though I were being put on trial in front of my own friends. The officers exchanged glances, observing both Karen's agitated demeanor and the relaxed atmosphere lingering in my backyard. As one officer probed for more details about our gathering, I sensed an opportunity to clarify things further. "It's just a handful of friends," I said earnestly. "We're just enjoying each other's company on what happened to be a beautiful day." They appeared puzzled, caught between Karen's forceful accusations and my explanations. The younger officer glanced at the older one, who finally sighed and turned his attention back to me. It was clear they were trying to gauge the situation without jumping to conclusions, an admirable approach amidst the bizarre circumstances. Nevertheless, I felt apprehension wash over me as it dawned on everyone involved that a simple backyard barbecue had spiraled into an event that would echo far beyond its original intent. The unease hung in the air like a heavy fog, leaving us all questioning how things could have gotten this far, and what consequences might stem from this chaotic intersection of HOA regulations and personal freedom. As the tension mounted and the officers tried to discern the truth amidst Karen's fervent claims, I felt an unexpected wave of frustration surging within me. It was a bizarre situation, one that felt surreal as I stood there, caught between the chaos of an innocent gathering and Karen's relentless pursuit of compliance. Just as I was about to reiterate my point about how we were merely enjoying a sunny day, a thought struck me like lightning. My dad's position as chief of police could change everything. Gathering my courage, I took a deep breath and decided it was time to reveal my father's identity. Actually, I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. My dad is the chief of police. The moment those words left my lips, time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. The reaction was immediate and palpable. Karen's confident demeanor faltered for just a split second. Her eyes widened in disbelief and confusion as she processed what I had just said. The authority she wielded so comfortably suddenly felt like it was slipping through her fingers. The officer's expressions shifted too. What had been skepticism morphed into surprise and a hint of respect. "Is that right?" the older officer asked, his tone more measured now as he glanced back at Karen, who remained momentarily speechless. The younger officer shifted his stance, clearly intrigued by this new development. I continued, feeling empowered by this revelation. "I assure you, this gathering is harmless. We're just friends enjoying each other's company." With every word, I could sense the dynamics changing. The narrative was no longer just about rule violations but now included the implications of relationships within our community. Karen's facade began to crack further. "Well, that doesn't excuse," she stammered, struggling to regain her footing. But the officers didn't seem inclined to entertain her assertions anymore. Instead, they turned their full attention to me, seeking clarity and understanding rather than conflict. In that moment of recognition, I felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief mingled with pride for my father's role in maintaining order in our community. Yet there was also a lingering sense of injustice. Why should it take my father's identity for people to recognize the absurdity of Karen's accusations? The atmosphere shifted from one filled with apprehension to one tinged with curiosity and uncertainty about how this newfound information would influence the unfolding events. As Karen struggled to reestablish her authority in light of my revelation, I realized that this confrontation had transformed from an ordinary clash over HOA rules into something much more significant. An opportunity to challenge the very fabric of our community's dynamics. The moment I revealed that my dad was the chief of police, the transformation in Karen was almost instantaneous. Her usually assertive demeanor crumbled, and the sense of control she had maintained slipped away like sand through her fingers. I watched as her previously confident posture melted into a tense rigidity, her eyes widening in disbelief as she processed the implications of my statement. The shift in her expression was palpable, moving from indignation to a mix of shock and embarrassment. As the officers shifted their focus towards me with newfound interest, Karen's flustered state became more conspicuous. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to protest or clarify, but no words came out initially. It was as if she were grappling with an internal monologue that questioned every word she had just hurled at me moments before her mind raced, and I could see her scrambling for a way to regain her footing in this unexpectedly awkward scenario. "I mean, it's not like I meant to," she stuttered out eventually, attempting to backtrack on her earlier accusations. "I just thought there might be noise, some sort of violation." Her voice trembled slightly now, lacking the authoritative tone she had wielded moments ago. It was evident that the weight of calling the police on someone connected to the chief of police was beginning to drown out her bravado. I could sense that Karen was acutely aware of how ridiculous this situation had become and that every second of hesitation only worsened her embarrassment. "I didn't realize it was a small gathering," she continued lamely, trying desperately to reshape her narrative in light of my revelation. "You know how people can get carried away." She flailed for excuses that weren't aligning with reality anymore. The officers exchanged glances again, one unimpressed eyebrow raised as they processed Karen's desperate attempts to justify her previous behavior. Their expressions showed a growing sympathy towards me and a palpable disdain for the toxic dynamic we'd all been subjected to by this woman's relentless enforcement of rules. Seeing Karen stumble over her words, while desperately trying to recover, left me feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pity. This whole absurd confrontation illustrated just how far someone could take authority without considering its repercussions, not only for others but also for themselves. Watching her unravel in real time underscored a powerful lesson about humility and accountability within our community dynamics. As I stood there amidst the unfolding chaos, a renewed sense of confidence replacing my earlier apprehension, I realized that Karen's reaction was not just about saving face. It marked a pivotal moment for both of us in redefining our roles within this neighborhood structure. After the chaotic confrontation with Karen, I had the chance to discuss the incident with my dad, who had always approached his role as chief of police with a deep sense of fairness and understanding. As he listened to my recount of the events, I could see the familiar twinkle in his eyes, a mix of concern for me and amusement at the absurdity of it all. He began reflecting on his responsibilities within the community. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "policing isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about fostering relationships and understanding people." He emphasized how important it was for him to maintain an open line of communication with residents, encouraging them to come forward with their issues rather than hiding behind accusations or assumptions. "When disputes arise, like the one you experienced, my job is to listen to both sides," he explained. "Often, it's not about who's right or wrong, but about finding common ground. Everyone has their own perspective, and sometimes misunderstandings can escalate because people forget we're all part of the same community." His words resonated with me, illuminating how a more dialogue-driven approach could have defused tensions long before they reached a boiling point. I shared my frustration about Karen's rigid enforcement of HOA rules. My dad nodded knowingly. "Rules are there for a reason," he said, "but they shouldn't be wielded like a weapon. People need to remember that compassion should guide their actions. After all, we're all human." He recounted stories from his years on the force, instances where he'd mediated neighborhood disputes over trivial matters like property lines and noise complaints. In each case, he'd approached the situations with empathy, aiming for resolutions that benefited everyone involved, rather than simply imposing penalties or fines. My father's emphasis was clear. Accountability should come hand in hand with understanding. As I listened to him talk, I realized that his view extended beyond his duties as a police chief. It reflected his values as a father and neighbor. He often encouraged me to empathize with others' experiences before rushing to judgment, wisdom that felt particularly relevant in light of my recent encounter with Karen. Ultimately, our conversation served as a reminder that community dynamics thrive on connection and mutual respect. My dad's insights highlighted what was truly lacking in Karen's approach, an understanding that rules should promote harmony rather than create division. This perspective would not only shape how I navigated future interactions, but also reaffirmed my belief in fostering dialogue over conflict, a lesson learned amidst chaos that would stay with me long after that fateful day. In the days following the incident with Karen, the atmosphere in our neighborhood underwent a noticeable shift. What had once been a community fraught with tension and anxiety regarding HOA regulations began to transform, albeit slowly. Conversations that used to revolve around compliance now included discussions about fairness, understanding, and personal freedom. The entire episode had sparked a collective reflection on the rigid enforcement of rules that Karen had championed for so long. Many residents, emboldened by the events they had witnessed, began voicing their opinions openly. Some felt sympathy for me after witnessing firsthand how an innocent gathering could spiral into chaos due to Karen's zealous nature. A few neighbors even approached me to share their own stories of perceived overreach by her, instances where minor infractions had been treated as serious offenses simply because she believed it was her duty to enforce every last rule. It became increasingly clear that many felt stifled under the weight of her watchful eye. Karen's reputation took a significant hit as well. She was no longer regarded simply as the HOA enforcer, but rather as someone who had overstepped her bounds. People started whispering behind closed doors about her heavy-handed tactics, and I noticed a palpable reluctance among neighbors to approach her with concerns or inquiries. She had transformed from an authoritarian figure into someone viewed with skepticism and caution, a dramatic reversal that made social interactions more strained. Even at community events where Karen once held sway, her presence was met with subdued responses. After all, how could one continue to impose strict adherence to rules when it was evident those rules could lead to unnecessary conflict? The very fabric of our neighborhood dynamics was beginning to change as residents sought to reclaim their sense of community without fear of retribution for minor infractions. Amidst this fallout, some neighbors began discussing reforming HOA policies to better reflect shared values rather than strict enforcement of arbitrary rules. Ideas were tossed around about hosting regular community meetings where all voices could be heard, an initiative aimed at fostering connection rather than division. These discussions were filled with hope and enthusiasm, signaling a pivot toward a more inclusive approach. As for Karen, the incident served as a wake-up call. She now found herself questioning her methods and whether they truly served the community's best interests. While she still tried to maintain some level of authority, it became increasingly clear that her previous approach was no longer effective or welcomed by the neighbors. It was evident that change was not only necessary but actively taking root in our community, a vital step toward healing relationships that had been strained for far too long. In the weeks following the incident, interactions with Karen took on a decidedly humorous tone, as neighbors began to navigate the awkwardness of being around her while simultaneously trying to maintain their own sense of community. Perhaps sensing the loss of her formidable grip on neighborhood dynamics, Karen attempted several times to engage in casual conversation, often met with a blend of hesitant smiles and eye rolls. One evening at the community potluck, meant for reconciling differences and building bridges, Karen decided to bring her famous potato salad, a dish she had proudly announced as the best in town. As she set it down next to my table, I couldn't help but recall how she had once treated my modest gathering like a riot. So when a neighbor approached tentatively and asked if anyone had ever called the cops on her potato salad, we all erupted into laughter. Karen flushed a deep shade of crimson but managed to chuckle along, an encouraging sign that perhaps she was beginning to see the humor in her own heavy-handedness. At another neighborhood gathering designed for open dialogue about HOA regulations, a cheeky resident brought colorful stickers that read Karen's Rules, alongside silly drawings of quirks in our neighborhood, like nudging plants to stay exactly 24 inches apart. When presenting one sticker to Karen herself, they declared it a creative interpretation of the HOA guidelines. Instead of becoming angry, Karen's embarrassment shone through as she gave an awkward smile and accepted the sticker like something akin to a trophy. Despite these lighter moments, there were still the inevitable attempts at conflict resolution. One day while checking mailboxes, Karen cornered me and nervously asked if I could relay any concerns my father might have about her behavior post-incident. In that moment of vulnerability, I took pity on her. I reassured her that my dad thought everyone could figure out their differences without strict enforcement, but also emphasized that empathy goes a long way, a fact which seemed lost on her before but may have begun filtering through thanks to recent events. The atmosphere in our neighborhood became almost idyllic despite its earlier strife. Laughter filled the air during what used to be tense meetings laden with distrust. Neighbors found ways to poke fun at both themselves and Karen's cognitive dissonance when it came to rules versus relationships. By sharing camaraderie over shared experiences and jokes about Karen's infamous calls about violations not merely related to mechanics but also cakes too tall or grass too green, we unified as a community. Through these lighthearted interactions, Karen gradually began shedding her rigid persona. More importantly, our neighborhood evolved into one where laughter became integral, a realization that sometimes breaking barriers starts with embracing the absurdity of our circumstances. In retrospect, while the initial confrontation was uncomfortable and chaotic, it led us all into a period marked by newfound joy and collective respect we hadn't truly fostered before. Reflecting on the chaos that unfolded with Karen and the ensuing neighborhood transformation, it becomes clear that authority can wield both power and pitfalls within a community. Initially, Karen's role as the strict enforcer of HOA rules created a chasm between residents and their ability to feel comfortable in their own homes. Her authoritarian approach stifled dialogue and fostered fear, highlighting how the enforcement of rules without empathy can lead to misunderstanding and resentment. The incident with my backyard gathering served as a catalyst for change, illuminating how easily misunderstandings can spiral into conflicts that impact community dynamics. What began as a normal afternoon turned into a situation that involved law enforcement simply due to Karen's misinterpretation of social interactions, a reminder of how rigid adherence to rules can overshadow common sense and compassion. As neighbors began sharing their own experiences, it became evident that many felt similarly stifled by Karen's vigilant oversight. This shared sentiment of being over-policed revealed an underlying truth. Communities thrive on relationships and personal accountability rather than fear. When authority figures prioritize compliance over connection, they risk alienating those they are meant to serve. The humor that developed in the aftermath demonstrated another side to authority, the ability to learn from our mistakes and adapt. By poking fun at Karen's earlier excesses, we created an atmosphere where laughing together helped mend fences. The introduction of playful stickers like Karen's Rules not only initiated lighthearted conversations, but also offered a way for everyone to reclaim their voices in addressing grievances collectively rather than defensively. This reflection leads to an important realization about personal accountability within the context of community authority. After all, each member plays a role in shaping the environment they inhabit. My father's emphasis on empathy as the cornerstone of effective policing resonated loudly with me. His insights reflect broader truths applicable beyond law enforcement. Ultimately, the incident outlined the fine line between necessary oversight and oppressive control. It revealed how laughter and engagement can act as tools for overcoming misunderstandings, fostering an inclusive environment where diverse perspectives are welcomed rather than feared. As we navigated this unexpected journey from tension to camaraderie, it reinforced the notion that authority should encourage connection rather than limit it. In conclusion, while the road to understanding was paved with missteps and confrontations, the community emerged stronger and more united. We learned that embracing our shared humanity, and even its comedic aspects, can create pathways for resolution that turn conflicts into opportunities for growth and connection. As we continue this journey together, it is clear that thriving communities are built not merely on rules, but on relationships grounded in mutual respect, understanding, and a healthy dose of humor. In reflecting upon the incident with Karen and its lasting effects on our community, it is clear that what began as a chaotic confrontation ultimately led to profound personal growth and a reevaluation of neighborhood dynamics. The once oppressive atmosphere, dominated by fear of HOA regulations and stringent enforcement, has transformed into one where open communication and compassion are now prioritized. This shift can be attributed to the collective realization among neighbors that authority should not stifle individuality or foster division. Instead, many residents have embraced the idea that mutual respect and understanding can lead to more harmonious living conditions. Conversations that were once filled with trepidation are now characterized by laughter and camaraderie, illustrating a newfound willingness to engage openly about each other's experiences and grievances. The humorous encounters with Karen following the incident, like the jokes surrounding her potato salad and the playful Karen's Rules stickers, have also played a significant role in fostering connection among residents. By allowing ourselves to laugh at the absurdity of the situation, we have collectively reclaimed our sense of community. This humor not only alleviated lingering tension but also acted as a healing balm, reminding us all that we share common struggles despite our differences. Furthermore, as Karen grapples with her own realization of how her actions affected others, there lies an opportunity for potential reconciliation between her and the community. While her initial response to conflict was heavy-handed, this experience may serve as a catalyst for her personal growth as well. The support of neighbors in addressing her behavior could open pathways for Karen to become more empathetic and approachable, perhaps even transforming her from an enforcer into a more collaborative figure within the neighborhood. In recent discussions about reforming HOA policies, there has emerged an enthusiasm for inclusivity, a desire to create guidelines that reflect shared values rather than rigid controls. Regular community meetings are now being proposed as venues for everyone's voice to be heard, an initiative born out of shared lessons learned through the chaos. Ultimately, this journey has illuminated that thriving communities thrive not just on rules, but on relationships built on empathy and respect. As we continue moving forward, embracing our shared humanity amidst humor and compassion will ensure that we are resilient in the face of misunderstandings. The transformation initiated by a seemingly innocuous gathering has laid the groundwork for a healthier, more connected community, one where authority serves to uplift rather than divide, paving the way for a future filled with unity and mutual understanding.